Okay then. Next on the agenda, we have a little bit of I'd say, to be fair, I've always looked at adole- bro, I've always looked at adolescence and adulthood. Just like the stages of life, how they defined it. I always found it like a bit weird how, not a bit weird, but it's like, okay then, so for the first 18 years of your life, you're a child. And then after that, you're an adult. Fair enough. But at the age of 25, for example, at the age of 25, someone has still been an adult. Like any person at the age of 25 has only been an adult for 7 years. So they've only got 7 years of experience as an adult, whereas they have 18 years experience as a child. So wouldn't like, from my point of view, I always thought like I would break it down into three stages, like three main stages. I would say your childhood, which is the first 18 years. I would say like you start to adult life, you get me, like adult induction, you get me, like say if it was American school system, this would be like the middle school, you get me, which is I would say from 18 to 36, the next 18 years. Then after that, so yeah, from 36 onwards, I would say that's the high school where you graduate and you go on to, like, you get what I mean? Like putting it into the context of, say, schooling system, if you was to do it like that, like, yeah, I would say adulthood. Yeah, obviously it starts after you're 18, but maybe give people a bit more leeway to say, yo, those next 18 years is you being able to find your place. Like, you get me? Because there's too much where it's like, yo, if you don't have this by 25, you're broke, or you're a bum, or you haven't made it, stop trying. And people are still young people at like 30, 35. You get me? Like, so yeah, it's just one of them ones. And then obviously looking at this story, it's kind of like put a little bit of validity to the things that I was thinking before I even saw this story. Like, you get me? And it just puts it into context a bit more of how, like, the different stages in life, especially like referring to like the brain age and stuff like that. You get me? So, and then maybe this like would highlight why we think certain other things in society are frowned upon, because I can link it to a few other issues in society. Well, not issues, but topics where people see that people feel like there's something wrong with it, or they might not agree with it fully, but can't necessarily justify in, say, scientific terms why. If you get what I mean, you get me. So yeah, let's get into the story anyway, cause I find it interesting. So, headline: Adolescence lasts into 30s. New study shows 4 pivotal ages for your brain. So, yeah, as the headline says, let's get a bit more into it. The brain goes through 5 distinct phases in life, with key turning points at ages 9, 32, 66, and 83, scientists have revealed. Around 4,000 people up to the age of 90 had scans to reveal the connections between their brain cells. Researchers at the University of Cambridge show that the brain stays in the adolescent phase until our early 30s, when we peak. They say the results could help us understand why the risk of mental health disorders and dementia varies through life. So yeah, it's basically saying like until you're, you know how like before it would say, yo, you stop developing when you're 25, you stop like you start growing. Like, you know, all them things that was like thought of in the past. Clearly, we're being updated with the new information because there's different stages now. It's extended to 32. So, and that's not like, that's on an average. So maybe there is somewhere it's 36, maybe there is somewhere it's 25, but it's a bit, the average is a bit further out from 25, where say in the UK where you're 16, and when you're 16, you're not an adult, but you're in that in between adult and child phase, 16, 17, 18. You're in between that phase where you could move out and live by yourself, but you're still a child, really and truly, you know. So yeah, it's like saying the first 16 years and then another 16 years and then another 30 years and then another 30, like around that. You get me? So yeah, I do feel that. And to say they only did it up to the age of 90, obviously there's not a huge amount of 100-year-olds where maybe if they incorporated people that was older, the averages would shift a bit more towards one way or the other. But yeah, I find it interesting that yeah, we're finding new things out every day, really and truly. But yeah, let's get a bit more into the story. So the brain is constantly changing in response to new knowledge and experience, but the research shows this is not one smooth pattern from birth to death. Instead, there are 5 brain phases. So childhood, from birth to 9. Adolescence, from 9 to 32. And you see, like, so saying that adolescence is from a 9-year-old to a 32-year-old. So in a way, if you want to put it like that, like a 25-year-old's brain is closer to a 9-year-old than it is to, say, a 45-year-old, or even say a 40-year-old. You get me? Like, it's a bit wild to think about it like that. Like, especially like in nowadays society where you say, like, we see people staying at home for longer, especially like, yeah, it's due to like housing prices and the cost of living and stuff like that. But then it puts that a bit into it puts it a bit into perspective where, say, we used to have the culture of, yeah, kick the kids out at 21, kick the kids out at 18, let them find out the world for themselves or whatnot, let them set up their whatever situation. But maybe, yeah, they do. Sometimes some people need a bit more time, or they're still in the adolescence phase of their life where they might not be able to manage all the things of adulthood because there's not really a manual, but it's just everyone's learning as they go. So you get me? And if you're in the adolescence phase, then maybe you would struggle with things a bit more and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a bit interesting to see, really. But okay, then let's go on a bit into the science or whatnot. So the brain rewires across the lifespan. It's always strengthening and weakening connections, and it's not one steady pattern. There are fluctuations and phases of brain rewiring. The lead author of the research, Dr. Alexa Mosley, one of the two, Mousley, maybe, told the BBC, some people will reach these landmarks earlier or later than others. Like I was saying earlier, it's like an average. So there's going to be some above, some below average 32. Makes sense. Yeah, but the researchers said it was striking how clearly these ages stood out in the data. The patterns have only now been revealed due to the quantity of brain scans available in the study, which was published in the journal Nature Communications. Let's see how they define these brain phases, because that would be a bit interesting. So the first period is when the brain is rapidly increasing in size, but also thinning out the overabundance of connections between brain cells called synapses created at the start of life. The brain gets less efficient during this stage. It works like a child meandering around a park, going wherever takes their fancy rather than heading straight from A to B. So what it's basically getting at there is, like, at first your brain, yeah, it's like a baby. Literally, like, it's just describing, like, to me, it's describing like a baby. Yeah, more say a toddler. Like, it just goes with the flow. We can learn, like, it's basically like, yeah, it's basically saying, yo, at first, loads of possibilities. It's only as you start learning and as you start developing where your possibilities start limiting and limiting and limiting, because you strengthen the connections that you're using and you weaken the connections that you don't use, where you set up to how your brain is going to be for like the rest of your life. Not exactly, but the basis for it, because it's like if you learn certain things in this stage where all the synapses are rewiring and firing randomly, like you're going to create the pathways. Like, for example, if you're always using the pathway to be, or the pathways related to being creative, they're going to strengthen and you'll most likely be a creative type of person. Whereas if you're using the pathways where you be more logical, for example, maybe you become a more logical person where you like doing stuff with numbers and you get what I mean, like stuff like that. So yeah, I can, that seems like makes sense. Okay then, adolescence. That changes abruptly from the age 9, where the connections in the brain go through a period of ruthless efficiency. It's a huge shift, said Dr. Moosley. That's what I'm going to call her, Dr. Moosley, because I don't know. Dr. Mousley. Dr. Mousley. That sounds better, to be fair. Describing the most profound change between brain phases. This is also the time when there is great risk of mental health disorders beginning. Unsurprisingly, adolescence starts around the onset of puberty, but this is the latest evidence suggesting it ends much later than we assumed. And that's the thing I was saying about the 25 thing, where we used to think, yeah, your brain stops at 25, you're an adult from then, but studies are showing like, yeah, we don't always know everything. So when they say the science is set, science is never set. We're always learning new information. We're always getting new data. There's always new studies. So just always bear that in mind when looking at things in a scientific lens, like in a scientific way. Because yeah, nothing's stationary. Everything's in motion. As Newton says, everything's in motion. So, it was once thought to be confined to the teenage years before neuroscience suggested it continued into your 20s and now early 30s. This phase is the brain's only period when its networks of neurons get more efficient. So it's basically saying that's when it starts. So yeah, first stage, childhood, your brain's just a wanderer, going with the flow, not setting its ways yet, adaptable, moldable. When it starts changing and starts going through ruthless efficiency, it's like, okay, we don't need this, cut it off. We don't need that, cut it off. We need this, yeah, strengthen. We need that, strengthen. So that's when you start to see the tendencies which start defining people's character and stuff like that. From my point of view, like that's the part of life where, however, a person, like, the saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. This is the stage where they can be taught new tricks. After, that's when they become an old dog. If you want to put it like that, like, you get me. But yeah, that kind of makes sense. I don't see anything too out of the ordinary, or yeah, it seems to make sense. So yeah, let's continue anyway. This phase is the brain's only period when its network of neurons get more efficient. Dr. Mousley said this backs up many measures of brain function, suggesting it peaks in the early 30s, but added it was very interesting that the brain stays in the same phase between 9 and 32. I find that crazy. I actually find that crazy that a 10-year-old and say a 29-year-old is in the same phase of brain development. Obviously, the 29-year-old's brain is going to be more developed, but they're in the same phase of development. Like, I find that crazy. Like, if anything, that should give hope to, say, our aging adults. The adults, say 25 plus, probably gives you a bit more hope to be like, yo, man, don't, like, life ain't done. Man can still learn new things, and just maybe because I don't know how to do this or I don't know how to do that, that doesn't mean you still can't learn. Because people like to say, oh yeah, you can only learn a language if you're a kid, or it's easy like, you get me, but it's basically saying adults are still in this phase. Like, you thought it stopped at 18. You got a whole nother, what, according to this study, at least on average, what, another 14 years. So yeah, if anything, I see this a bit as a motivation to, like, yo, get shit done, get stuff, like, get the ball rolling if it hasn't been rolling already, like, learn something new, a new skill, a new passion, whatever, like, so yeah, I find it interesting, like, and it's just mad, like, how, say, a kid and an adult is in the same brain phase. You get me? Crazy. So adulthood, not kidulthood. We just talking about kidulthood. This is adulthood. Anyway, next comes a period of stability for the brain as it enters its longest era, lasting 3 decades. So, the longest era lasting 3 decades. So 30 years. Makes sense. Okay, so changing is slower during this time compared to the fireworks before, but here we see the improvement in brain's efficiency flip into reverse. Dr. Mousley said this aligns with a plateau of intelligence and personality that many of us have witnessed or experienced. From that, I'm guessing they're saying, like, adulthood is the part where you reach your peak. Like, that's where, like, not you reach your peak, but let's say, like, you put it like this, at adulthood, it seems like that's when you reach who you are, if that makes sense. Like, for example, an 18-year-old who hasn't been educated, say an 18-year-old who, say, didn't get any GCSEs, for example, they work for the next 10 years, could still be educated and gain a wealth of knowledge and personality and experience. But it's like it's saying at this stage, that's where it's more limited. It's starting to decline on learning new things and increasing intelligence and changing personality traits and stuff like that. So from my point of view, it's saying, yeah, adulthood, that's when you're stuck in your ways. So it's up to you between that age of 9 and 32 to pattern your brain where you're the person that you want to be at these ages. Like, try and get rid of those bad habits that you don't like, because once adulthood hits, maybe it's stuck there until you're 83, and the next phase comes around, or 66 or whatever it was. Like, you get what I'm saying? So yeah, maybe that's the case. Like, and to be fair, it does seem like that, because how many times have you seen a kid act a certain way and then they grow up and then they change their ways and, like, say they become a better person? I've seen that happen a lot. But then how many times have you seen an adult who's stuck in their ways and they're not able to grow like that, to where they're changing their ways? For example, like, they're stuck in their ways and they've been stuck in their ways for the last 20 years, for example. But that's them. You understand? Like, so yeah, maybe it's something like that. Anywho, early aging. This kicks in at 66, but is not an abrupt and sudden decline. Instead, there are shifts in the patterns of connections in the brain. Instead of coordinating as one whole brain, the organ becomes increasingly separated into regions that work tightly together, like band members stay in their own solo projects. Although this study looked at healthy brains, this is also the age at which dementia and high blood pressure, which affects brain health, are starting to show. So yeah, it's saying at this age, your brain starts compartmentalizing. It's losing connections between different parts of the brain, and maybe, yeah, that's what leads to the decline in, like, I wouldn't say mental health, but like literally the mental health of older fellow humans or older peoples, because yeah, it's saying if this is the age that it starts to show and the brain is less connected between itself and stuff like that, then yeah, like, say for example, if another part of the brain was, keeping one part of the brain in check, that would lead to deterioration because they're losing connection or stuff like that. Obviously, I'm not a neuroscientist, but what I know of the brain is, yeah, these connections between each other, like it helps stimulate the whole as a one. Whereas if it's compartmentalizing and the connections are being lost, then it's not creating that circuit of being one. So one part can malfunction, or like, do you get what I'm trying to say? Like, that's how I visualize it anyway. So yeah, it's one of them ones where that would seem to make sense. And then late aging. So then at age 83, we enter the final stage. There is less data than for the other groups, as finding healthy brains to scan was more challenging. That's self-explanatory from early aging. So the brain changes are similar to early aging, but even more pronounced. Dr. Mousley said what really surprised her was how well the different ages align with a lot of important milestones, such as puberty, health concerns later in life, and even the pretty big social shifts in your early 30s, such as parenthood. So yeah, that's quite interesting because, yeah, like, as you would get to, say, the age of maturity where we're having kids, that would make sense because I'll say on average, most people are having kids between 20 and 30. You get me? Maybe not. I haven't looked at the statistics and I know that the birth rate's declining and all these things and but yeah, like, I would say that's the age most people are having kids. So maybe that's got something to do with it. When you have kids, there might be a biological change where your brain goes into the next stage. And if most people are having kids between them ages, it might take those few years for it to start going into play, and then maybe your body just is already like, yo, if you haven't had kids by 32, it goes by that stage anyway. So yeah, that does seem interesting that it could be linked to like parenthood and stuff like that, because yeah, parenthood is a social shift, but it's also a biological shift, because remember, an interaction with a person is a biological interaction as well as a social or psychological, whatever you want to call it. You get me? Like, it's one of them ones. So yeah, it's crazy. And to be fair, this part here is a question I was thinking about as I was reading the article. Like, what would be the disparities between men and women? Like, would it be the stages are earlier in women? Because, like, you know how, like, to say women mature faster than men. Would it be their stages are earlier? Would it maybe be their stages are later? Like, you get me? And then maybe if we look at those questions, we could have a scientific approach to looking at how or why, say, 20-year-old girls prefer older men, or you get what I mean, like stuff like that. Like, maybe there might be similarities in the brain phase of a man and the brain phase of a woman to why those situations work. Obviously, I understand that there's money and status and all the other things to go along with it, but from a psychological point of view, maybe that could answer some of those questions where you're like, oh, Leonardo DiCaprio, but how do you know that they're not, could be on the same page? And you get what I'm trying to say? Maybe not, but maybe that's the case. This is why we do science, find out the answer, or the most likely answer for now, So it's one of them ones. Well, yeah, okay then. So let's read this last paragraph. The study did not look at men and women separately, but there will be questions such as the impact of menopause. Duncan Astle, professor of neuroinformatics at the University of Cambridge and part of the team responsible for the research, said many neurodevelopmental, mental health, and neurological conditions are linked to the way the brain is wired. Indeed, differences in brain wiring predicts difficulties with attention, language, memory, and a whole host of different behaviors. The director of the Centre for Discovery Brain Sciences at the University of Edinburgh, Professor Tara Spires-Jones, who did not work on the research paper, said, "This is a very cool study highlighting how much our brains change over our lifetimes." She said the result fit well with our understanding of brain aging, but caution, not everyone will experience those network changes at exactly the same ages. Yeah, it makes sense. It's saying, yeah, not everyone's gonna change, their brain's gonna change at 9 and 32 and them exact ages, but it's saying majority, that's the average. So, it's one of them ones where it's around that age. So, give or take, It could happen at 7 on the early side. It could happen at 11. You get me? The childhood brain switch to adolescence. Maybe the adolescence to adulthood could change at 35. Maybe it could change at 27. Like, it's give and take, but it just shows you, like, maybe as a 20 plus year old or whatever you want to call it, man ain't as mature as you would like to think. You know, maybe we're still in that childhood brain where we think we're adults, and we are adults legally and socially, but mentally, are we? Because sometimes I don't feel like an adult necessarily. I still feel like a child in some ways. Like, you get me? And maybe that's just my personality, because I'm like kind of immature and hyperactive at sometimes. But you get what I mean? Like, I don't feel old. Yeah, I don't know how to explain it really and truly, but yeah, I just found this article interesting, and what we're learning about how the brain works and different stages of life that we might go through, and the implications that it might have in real world situations like dementia and mental health and even relationships and stuff like that. Yeah, I just find it interesting. So yeah, that was a scientific one.